So what do Christian theologians wrestle with? So there's three types of categories when Christians think about war. And the Bible has verses that seem to directly or indirectly discuss these. Just so you know, so David and his men are crying. I guess I should finish here. Chapter 30, verse 7. Then David, so after you cry and weep, what do you do next? Pray, right? Verse 7, then David said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. Abiathar brought it to him, and David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? And the Lord says, pursue them, he answered. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. And they do. But once again, they cry and they pray. I would hope that the leader of Israel, I would hope the leader of the United States, we should pray. We should decide. Because when you take hostages, that changes the story. If you took my wife and kids, it changes the story, okay? So there's three different types of wars thinking with Christians. There's verses that support these three. The first type is our Christians who believe in pacifism and or non-resistance. So last week's sermon, which I would say is talking about do not take revenge on a personal level, these Christians would take to a societal level, that you should follow this as a society, not to take revenge, not to defend, not to, and there are many Christians through hundreds of years that have followed this. Anabaptist, Mennonite, Amish, Brethren, Apostolic Christian, Holiness Pacifist, Quakers, Moravian Church. They would say that's what Jesus did. He did not fight. The early Christians did not fight the Jews or the Romans when they were being put to death. They trusted the Lord. They didn't hold on to their lives. And this is what I practice. Now, usually under this, the non-resistant, don't resist an evil person, a lot of times it comes up about self-defense. And again, this is usually the Christians that, to me, say the God of the Old Testament is different from the God of the New Testament. But here's one verse on self-defense. And again, I think this is from the Lord. It's Exodus 22, 2-3. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow. Now, today, he'd probably be shot, okay? But back in those days, they didn't have guns, so they would probably use a baseball bat, okay? The defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, so if it happens during the day and you say, hey, that was my neighbor and he's dead here in my house, they'd be like, whoa, wait a second. We think maybe you had an argument with your neighbor and you killed him. But if it's at nighttime, this is why, by the way, I will not visit any of you after midnight, okay? My limit is midnight. I don't show up. I'm worried I'll be shot through the door. I was sharing that you never know what you're going to do when you have a break-in. So Robin and I were married 5 years. We're upstairs. I'm sleeping away in my bed nicely. And Robin goes, dear, someone's downstairs. Someone's broke into our house. So I kind of like, and then I heard like a noise. I was like, I got kids, wife upstairs. So I go down, I creep down the steps. I go through the kitchen, around the corner into the dining room. It's dark, there's no lights on. And when I go in the dining room, I see a tall guy standing in the dark right there within about 2 feet in front of me. Now, what happens, what do they call it? What are the things that happen when you face something terrifying? What do you usually do? Fight or flight or pass out. How about that one for a third alternative? No. I am not kidding you when I tell you that I did not have time to analyze it. I did not think to myself, wait a second, does he have a gun or a knife? I went into that guy with everything I had. I was punching, screaming, and that guy went flying across the room. So I turn on the light, and we still to this day have that coat rack that my hat was on top of the coat rack, and my raincoat was coming down the coat rack, and I'm telling you, it looked just like a guy. And my knuckles were sore for months. And fortunately, this is before cell phones, so that my wife wasn't calling 911. But you can hear her screaming upstairs. So, it's just a warning. Don't break into my house after 3 o'clock. That's why you need a dog. Yeah. We had a killer cat. All right. So here's the second theory on war, and this is kind of where I lean, that you can have a just war. A just war is morally justifiable through a series of criteria, all of which must be met for a war to be considered just and right to engage in. And Augustine is the one that kind of fleshed this out the most. He was a theologian of the 4th century. There are 2 categories under just war. The right to go to war. Okay, so is it right? Is whoever we're fighting, are they committing horrible crimes, doing, terrible things, and we need to go to save people, stop this, evil from advancing? And then the second one, which is, this is the toughest one for a Christian nation, especially the United States, is not only does it have to be a just war, but we have to fight it in the right conduct in war. So this is what makes it difficult for a Christian nation. So let's say you have a school and you have there's 100 kids in that school, and there are 3 terrorists in that school. Many other nations and other religions were going to have no problem blowing up that school to get those 3 terrorists. But in the United States, because we're Christian and we are trying to fight in a just war, that would be very difficult for us to do. Now, I realize sometimes accidentally we will kill, innocent people when we're fighting some kind of terrorist or war or whatever. But generally, the U.S. would be like, no, you got to figure out some other way to get those 2 or 3 terrorists. We're not going to blow up the whole school to get those guys. Figure out some other system. It just wouldn't be right. And so it makes it, I think, a lot more difficult for America, because we're always, okay, is this a Christian thing? Is this a right war? Are we fighting it in a right way? The whole world is watching us, though they don't follow the same rules we follow. Questions that are asked is such as having a just cause, being a last resort, being declared by a proper authority, the government possessing right intention, having a reasonable chance of success, and the end being proportional to the means used. And then the third type of war is called preventative war. So this is very complex, and this is mind-boggling for Christian ethicists. Ethical Christians? A preventative war is an armed conflict initiated in the belief that military conflict, while not imminent, is inevitable, and that to delay would involve greater risk. The party which is being attacked has a latent threat capability, or it has shown that it intends to attack in the future based on its past actions and posturing. Wikipedia. Does everyone follow that? So this is like, okay, there's a nation, they operate under a different philosophy, they're developing nuclear weapons, and we know they might use them once they get them, and so we do a preventative war. Some would say that 1 Samuel 11, the war hadn't started. The men were in the town, and he says, hey, if you let us gouge out your eyes, So a literal war hadn't started, but King Saul gathers all of Israel, the 330,000 soldiers, and I would call it a preventative war, goes in and wipes them out before the war actually would start or happen. Now, this is tough. This is this is why they pay people big bucks somewhere up above.